Sometimes it's really easy to underestimate the simple joys in the simple project that doesn't take very long to do but is so useful. And for me, that has to be the drawstring bag. It's the thing that time and time again I've been asked by friends to make more of for them. I usually include them as packaging when I've made a homemade gift, and I pop them in a little drawstring bag, and then I find years later sometimes that they're still using it in the changing bag to keep the nappies in. Or for me, in my studio, I keep it to keep my pens and pencils in. So I assume that everybody knows how to make one, but that's daft, because unless someone shows you, you don't necessarily know. So I thought I would go through with you today the drawstring bag and how to make one. Drawstring bags are something that I quite often scrap bust with, and what I mean by that is I will go into my scrap box and I'll go, oh, it's pretty big. I could get a reasonable drawstring bag out, and all I'm looking at in terms of sizing is how much space I can get. So I will fold my fabric in half and look at this and go, okay, so I could get a drawstring bag that's around 8 inches wide, probably by the time we finished it about 8 inches tall. So the first thing that we are going to do is iron our fabric. There is nothing worse than working with a fabric that is wrinkly crinkly. So we're going to press it before we cut so that we can make sure everything stays nice and straight. So with our lovely ironed fabric, we are going to cut this to size. So I am going to cut these using my Pattern Master and my rotary cutter. You could use absolutely anything. You could mark them with a pencil or chalk and then cut them with a pair of scissors. I really enjoy cutting square things with my board. It's just, you know that you're getting things square and plumb and fabulous. The seam allowances that we are going to put on these are not significant along the edges. The only place that it is significant is at our top hem edge. So I will go through that with you so that you can figure out how much you need to account for there to make sure your bag doesn't end up decidedly smaller. Once we have cut our fabric to size, you are left with some pieces that could look like any one of these. The differences between them is this one has a fold on the side, so it's a sort of longer and fatter rectangle. This one has a fold on the bottom, so it's a long, thin rectangle. And this one is 2 separate rectangles. The size all depends on what finish size you want your bag to be. If you do it using this method where you have got 2 separate pieces, this is basically going to be the size of your bag. There are a couple of factors that you will need to consider though if you are trying to fit a specific size object inside. One, I tend to be leaving about a centimetre seam allowance on all the way around. So the whole thing is going to end up 1 centimetre or 3/8 smaller on all of your edges. So that means that if I'm starting off with a 9.5 inch wide piece, then I'm going to end up at the end of this with something that's just larger than 8.5 inches. And that 1 inch when you're dealing with most things won't make too much difference, but sometimes it can make a big difference to things fitting. On our top, we're going to be using 2 inches to bring this down, or it's about 5 centimeters. We are going to do a double fold because it gives a really lovely, neat finish at the top. So you can visualize how this is going to look by folding in your seam allowances, and suddenly you get a bit of a vibe on what sort of size drawstring bag we're going to end up with at the end. We shall be placing our fabric right sides together. And then we are going to be seaming all the way around, leaving an opening at the top. I say at the top because if you're using a directional fabric, you want to make sure that you're leaving it at the top. For a lot of them, it's not going to make much difference, but directional, always give it a think. We are going to be seaming all the way around, but we need to leave an opening, and we need to leave an opening where our ribbon is going to be coming out. If we're working on a 2 inch turn down, we need to be leaving an opening between sort of just over 2 inches and just before you get to 3 inches, and that's going to give you your little opening where the ribbon is going to be exiting. So what I will do is I will seam this together, leaving that opening in that spot, which before I head to the machine I am going to mark with a pin. So if I mark my 2-inch point, and I mark my 3-inch point, then I know that I need to just go just over that pin and start again just before that pin in order to leave a really nice little neat opening. So I have stitched all of my side seams with my openings, and I've left the pins in so that you can see where they all are. This one we have gone all the way around, leaving an opening in the side. This one I've done just the sides because I've got a fold at the bottom, leaving the opening in the same place. And the same on this one. It doesn't matter if the opening is on the left or the right, the bag's going to be used in all of the directions. So you can hopefully see that I have, these are the pins that are marked at 2 and 3 inches, or 5 and 7.5 centimeters, and I've just gone past that first pin and I've started again just before I've got to the other one, leaving an opening that's about the size of my finger. Now if you want to use a smaller heading, that's absolutely fine. It comes down to the width of the ribbon you plan to use, the size of the bag. If it's particularly small, you're going to find that's quite heavy and bulky for the top. So all you are doing with your opening is you are doubling the width that you want your top to be to create your double fold, and then you are marking that point and then the width of your fold again. So if you were using 1/2 inch instead, so if I wanted my top to be folded down like 1/2 inch like so, I would double that. So that's going to take me to my 1-inch point, and I would mark there, and then I would mark again 1/2 inch lower. And your opening is going to be between there. And you can see that suddenly your opening gets much, much smaller when your heading space is smaller. The other thing to consider is, I know I have stitched these without worrying about neatening my seams. I tend to sew everything normally on an overlocker, but it's a drawstring bag. Sometimes I just decide that it's fine, it doesn't matter. They're all flat cotton, so I'm not massively worrying about things fraying particularly. But if you wanted to, what I would say is it is going to be much easier because of this opening to neaten your edges with it open flat, going around each side as a single piece before you fold it together and then stitch, rather than doing it the other way around. Because if I was to do this the other way around, I'd be fine on this bottom seam, but when I got up here, I would be at risk of closing my opening, which is not what I want to do. So we are now ready to form our channel at the top, and we are going to do most of this work at the iron. What I will be doing is I will be pressing this seam open. It's going to make things much easier when it comes to finding and getting the ribbon in, and it's going to give it a much neater finish. And then I'm going to be folding my 1 inch and then my 2 inches down and pressing that on the iron. Now you can either do that on your table with your ruler and pencil and pin it and then take it to the iron. What I tend to do is just go straight to the iron with a ruler or a tape measure and figure it all out in there. So I will go and do that. So now my headings are all nicely pressed on, you really start to get a vibe on what it is we are trying to achieve here. So if I open this up and go in here, you should now be able to see I've got this nice little opening, and that opening is covered on the inside by this channel that we are going to form, and we are going to form it through top stitching. So we are going to be stitching as close to this folded edge at the bottom here as you can comfortably get. Now, top stitching is generally done from the outside, but on this occasion, because it's a functional top stitching, we need the top stitching to be holding the bottom of this channel. I will actually work from the inside so that I can see what I'm doing and work my way along the bottom here. You can also run a line of stitching across the top. It's not required, it's purely an aesthetic thing. Some people like it, some people don't. So that is our next job, is to run our top stitching on each of these. These are now all stitched. So on two of them I've just done the one, and on this pink one here I have stitched top and bottom, and you can see it looks really nice and neat. All I've got to do is trim off the ends of my thread that my machine has left, and I've got my opening here beautifully in the middle of my channel. So I can turn this the right way out, pushing out my corners. It's little things like that that really make a big difference in making something look really cool. We've got these lovely little pouches that are forming. So this one I have just done the one line of stitching on, and it just gives a different finish, but still looks really cool. And we have got our opening a little bit higher than that one. Comes down to my pressing and my accuracy with my threads, but as long as this opening is in between our channel, we are absolutely fine on that. And then we have our fishy one last. One line of stitching again with our opening in our channel. And so now the only job that is left to do is to thread our ribbon through, and there are a few different ways you can do that. My favourite method is with the safety pin. The only thing you need to factor into it is making sure that whichever safety pin that you use, it's going to fit in your opening so that you can easily get that around. I tend to use these little ones quite a lot. I tend to find them really work very well for getting it round. You can use a darning needle. Objects like this also exist, where the idea is that you thread your ribbon through there and you can push this all the way around. It can be tricky though if you're on quite a narrow bag. As you can see, I'm struggling to get to this bendy bit, and so I'm stuck. So if you're doing a large bag, then something like this is going to work, but on something small, you're going to struggle. So I've got a length of ribbon, and we need to establish how big we need it to be. I make it larger than the width of the top twice. We need it to go all the way through and back, and we want something to be there in order for hanging and tying a little knot. So I would always err on the side of making it slightly longer versus slightly shorter. So I would say that looks really good. I know I've got plenty of room there to tie myself a little knot to secure it all together when we're done. And so for anyone wondering, that is me going about 3 inches over twice. So it's the width of our bag plus 3 inches times 2 would be the calculation that I would work on. So I'm going to cut this to length, thread on my safety pin. And the reason for the safety pin is it means you're going to find it easier to push it around the channel. Pushing a flat piece of fabric is really hard. You can't really get a grip on it, whereas this I can physically push. So I'm just going to feed it around through my channel. And this is where, if you are working on a narrow channel, you will start cursing. And if you're on a nice wide one, you should find it slightly easier. The tricky bit comes when you get to your seam allowance, if you have one on the opposite side. It's the definite advantage to this method with our fold at the side, is you don't have to maneuver past any seam allowances. But it's fine. You may get a little stuck and need to just reverse a little bit and try and make your way through, but it will go. So you're always pushing it through, making sure that this other end doesn't get lost inside the bag. And then I am going to, you can see, I found my way back out. We will tie these in a knot. And then you can either cut a little V at the end of your ribbon to stop it fraying, or what I like to do is a bit easier, is just cut an angle. And there you have a really cute little drawstring bag ready to have something lovely put in it that will draw up and keep something safe inside. So I will quickly whiz around these so you can see all 3 of them finished. A drawstring bag could be made out of anything really, whether you're making it as in a huge size, in some hessian, or something that you've decorated in order to make a stocking for your child, like a nice little Christmas sack, or whether it's tiny in organza to be used as a little bath tea bag for you to be able to put some salts in so that you can float in the bath. If you're using something like an organza, it's definitely going to be trickier, but it's definitely achievable. They really can be made in anything. A jersey bag is going to have a very different feel to it, but it would still work. And they are just really quick to do. Sometimes if I've made my channel quite small, quite narrow, and then I decide to put quite a wide ribbon in, I will just fold it in half to try and get it through, but it can make it a bit bulkier. So it is always worth considering the size of your ribbon before you begin to make sure that it is whatever you want to use is going to fit. But other than that and choosing your fabrics, the world really is your lobster. If you wanted to create any nice applique designs or anything on the front, you would simply cut them to size and then place your design on before you stitch it up and turn it into a drawstring bag. I added this nice coral ribbon onto this pink one. And try not to leave yourself too big an end here when it's open, because you see when it's sort of small, you will end up with quite a long length. But you want the bag to be able to fully open. And there we have it. 3 really quick and really simple drawstring bags. So there you go, drawstring bag. Make lots, all different sizes, shapes, and as I do, like include them as packaging, because people love it. They A, love a homemade gift, and B, the joy of putting something in a nice little bag that you then know is going to be used as well is just fabulous.